Hello, 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 hello. Hello, my loves. My name is Dustina. This is Spiritually Bougie Astrology, and we are going to talk about Daddy Saturn. I love calling Saturn Daddy Saturn because really anytime that I meditate on Saturn, anytime that I do things with Saturn, Saturn just gives me that old school dad vibe. Like he's going to tell you what to do. He gives you an idea of what to do, but then he gives you just that little inch to do some things yourself. And then if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you deal with his wrath. You deal with the ass chewing or the ass busting or whatever it is, because that's just his vibe. Saturn is such an interesting planet. And the thing is like everybody takes Saturn's energy as horrible. He is a malefic planet. He is a planet that doesn't necessarily aid us in the most direct way because it's a pressurizing planet. For thousands of years, because astrology truly is thousands of years old, everything within astrology was written within the bounds of Saturn because it was believed that Saturn was the edge of our universe, the sun being the center, Saturn being the edge. Therefore, all of the rules and all of the governing bodies and all of the ways that we manage things and we did things were done within the bounds or the temperament, so to speak, of Saturn. Saturn represents the government. Saturn represents laws. Saturn represents our karma. Saturn represents the church. Now, when I'm saying church this time, I'm not talking about preachers. I'm not talking about the yogis. I'm talking about the actual institution, the structure of the church. I would say the Pope would be more Jupiter, the Catholic Church and all of its mess, that's more Saturn. You can see how that goes. Saturn rules time. And you will hear me say that a lot. Saturn is the indicator as to whether it is time for something to happen or not. We've all been in situations, we've all been in times of our life where we have felt like we want to do something. We want to go somewhere. We feel called to do something. We feel called to put something together. We feel called to go and change some aspect either of our life or in our surroundings. It can be as simple as a car. It can be as large as going back to school, getting married, things along these lines. We feel very called to deal with or do certain things. And Saturn, most of the time, is really the one putting that in front of you and letting you know it's either coming in the future or you're ready to do it right then. And we all know the difference. It's just we've never necessarily had that put in perspective for us. I've known, I'm going to use myself for an example, that I was going to be doing this podcast for over a year. However, internally, I didn't feel like the time was right. I didn't feel like there were certain things done in my immediate surroundings and in my immediate area. I didn't feel like certain things were in a good settlement or if they were in a good routine to be able to do this regularly. Because the one thing I don't want to do is start something just to let it fall to the wayside later. I want to be consistent in this area. So I needed to make sure that certain parts of my surroundings were also consistent. And that didn't happen until after Saturn ended its retrograde and went direct and has done what all that it was doing in the sign of Aquarius. However, the reason I want to talk about Saturn today is because Saturn just changed signs. Literally earlier this week on March the 7th during the Virgo full moon, Saturn made its way into Pisces and it changed signs. It gave some relief to fixed signs, Aquarius, Scorpio, Leo, and Taurus. It gave relief for those fixed signs, but it transferred its energy into a new area. It transferred into a mutable water sign. Now, I haven't talked about mutables with you guys before. I will whenever I do a future 101 video. We'll talk about the difference between cardinal, fixed, and mutable. But mutable is a bridge energy. Fixed signs are the more consistent timeline within a season. Cardinal signs are the start of new seasons, but mutable signs are the bridges from the fixed energy to the next season. So a lot of times whenever we're in Pisces season, when we're in Gemini season, when we're in Virgo season, when we're in Sagittarius season, we're in this area where like our weather patterns are a mix of both. They're a mix of the season that we're leaving and the season that we're going into. They're a mix of, going off of the idea of Sagittarius, they're a mix of like wet fall weather and going into snowy winter weather. If going into where we're about to go now, we're talking about Pisces season, we've had this mix of like dry, cold, wintry weather, yet flashes of spring growing into it, because we're bridging our season from fixed winter to actual spring. And at the zodiacal new year, which will be the start of Aries season, we will start spring. We're in an adaptable energy, and we're in a changeable energy. And we're in an area where change and adapting and the energy involved doesn't like to be direct. In fact, it likes to be very, very passive. One thing that I will note about Pisces placements is they're willing to help and they're willing to be involved, but very, very few want to be in charge. They don't want to be in charge of the shit show. They just want to be a part of the show. Don't put them in charge of anything that's not necessarily like their forte. Now, that doesn't go for everybody, but a lot of times whenever it comes with Pisces, they are the go with the flow type, not the take command and take charge type. So the thing about Saturn is how long he takes to go through a single sign. Depending on the sign and depending on retrogrades, he goes through an individual sign every 2.5 to 3 years. Sometimes it's as short as 2, so from 2 to 3 years. And it takes him 29.5 years to do a full cycle around all 12 zodiac signs. Many young people really don't start to strengthen themselves and go to the next level of their life until they have their Saturn return. In my opinion, Saturn returns are whenever we truly level up into the area of adulthood that we're in, that we need to be in for the next chapter. So with that being said, there are 2 generations of Saturn returns that need to be aware that their natal Saturn is in Pisces. So what I have here is January 28th of 1994 to April 7th of 1996. If you have someone in your life that's from this timeline, if you know a sibling, a cousin, something like that, that is turning 28 this year, 29 this year, or 28 or 29 next year, they're 27 now. They are going to be in this range. They're going to fall into this area where they're entering by sign, not specifically by degree, so to speak, but by sign, they're entering their Saturn return. And everyone's going to have their individual Saturn placement in different spots. And what they need to know is like most hits of Saturn crossing over your natal is going to be more than one hit. In fact, a lot of it is going to have 2 hits or 3 hits, depending on how the retrograde goes over your natal placement. The other generation that will be having now their second Saturn return is March 23rd, 1964 to March 3rd of 1967. People that are going to be going through their Saturn oppositions. I'm just going to go ahead and do this line as it is. July 26 to 1978, July 26, 1978 to September 21st of 1980. You are having your second Saturn return. I skipped one. September 2nd, 2007 to July 21st of 2010. You are going through your first Saturn opposition. This is going to be kids. So parents need to be understanding of this. If you had a child born between late 2007 to the summer of 2010, your child is going to be going through their Saturn opposition. And that can be very difficult for them if they're not aware of the energy going on. Obviously, they're not going to be, and they're not going to necessarily have the ability to speak what is affecting them and what is going on with them. So just be aware of that. And then I have a little bit of an older generation, September 19th. That's what I did. 1948 to August 13th of 1951. I have an asterisk with this one. In the later part, Saturn went out of the sign and then retrograded back. So there's a small area in 1951 where 1950 to 1951 where we had Saturn in another sign, but for the most part, that is that generation. Okay, Saturn squares. If your natal Saturn is in Sagittarius, you are going to be having a very interesting square because it's going to be a little bit different than Gemini squares. Your natal Saturn will technically be applying to transit Saturn. So you're going to have a shift in letting some things go so you can progress into a new direction. Sagittarius Saturn squares would be December 23rd, 2014 through December 19th of 2017. So these are the young ones. This is kind of growing pain energy for them. November 16th, 1985 to November 12th of 1988. These, both the 85 and the 88 and the 2014 to 2017, both of these ends, there is a timeline where Saturn was still in Scorpio, came into Sag, backed into Scorpio, and went out of Sag. So in that 85 range and in that 2015 range, there could be a window where your actual natal Saturn is in Scorpio, not so much the other. And then the last one is October 10th, 1956 to January 5th of 1959. You are going through a Saturn square as well. Depending on what house that's in, I'll get into that part here in just a second, but depending on the house that it's in, it'll vary as to what it's doing to you at that time. For Gemini squares will be different because your natal Saturn will be getting the application of transit Saturn applying to it. So yours won't be quite as much like the Sag. Sag needs to let something go. Gemini needs to take certain things in. If you have your natal Saturn in Gemini, you need to take something in or adjust something to allow more things to progress towards your life goals and towards your ultimate direction in this life. So the young ones, April 20th, 2001 to June 3rd, 2003. June 18th, 1971 to April 18th of 1974. I have an asterisk here. This is another one we had a little bit of timeline where Saturn had went into Cancer and then came back. So there could be a small area in the later part of 74, or in the later part of 73, early part of 74, where your Saturn is not in this area. So there's a bit of an asterisk in there. And then the older one is May 8th, 1942 to June 20th of 1944. So if you didn't listen to the last podcast, the Astrology 101 podcast, where I was talking about understanding your ascendant and where it's at, part of this podcast is going to reflect some information that I put into there. And I specifically did that one first because I know I have some listeners that they don't listen to a bunch of other astrologers. They know me personally. They come to me personally for their information or their spiritual wellness or their coaching or whatever we want to call it. But they come to me directly. I've been an independent private astrologer for a long time. So I have some people that fall into this area. So I want you to be aware if you get sent this video from a friend or you find it later on and you're questioning just like how this is going to affect you, it's going to be more based off of your rising sign than anything else. However, if for some reason you don't know where your ascendant is, you don't have an exact birth time, or there's potentially an error or something like that, and you're questioning whether your ascendant's in the right spot, what I would say is listen at least to your sun sign, but understand that it's going to be a little bit more subjective. It's not going to be as accurate because if you are a Gemini sun, but your ascendant is in Leo, we're talking about two very different energies of Saturn and Pisces. We're talking about the difference of career to the difference of like secrets and affairs and occult and taking out debts and things like this. So understand that if you listen to your sun sign, it will still give you some information. It will still help you in some ways, but it will not be as accurate if you don't know what your rising sign is. So just to be aware of that. Okay. I'm going to pull you up now. Come on. All right. It is not March 7th. What I did is I backed the calendar up to March the 7th. I have the ascendant in Aries, so I want to start with Aries and Aries risings whenever I talk about Saturn and what it's going to be doing. Just know that, again, this is going to be based off your rising sign, not your sun sign. And whenever we go over parts of this, whenever it comes to those Saturn oppositions or those Saturn returns or squares or whatever we're talking about with those individual timelines that I've already given the dates for, I'll put more emphasis on what that can be resulting in when I get to that rising sign. So for Aries and Aries rising, having Saturn transiting your 12th house, Saturn actually does really well in the 12th house, but I put a lot of emphasis right now in regards to what Saturn is doing into Jupiter and what it's doing, and the fact that Jupiter is now in your first house. So having Saturn currently in your 12th tells me that a lot of things from the past, a lot of areas of healing, a lot of nostalgia is going to be a part of the mix. There are certain things that it has come to a point that we need to let them go. It's time to let them go. It's time to let karma do its thing. It's time to let go of old ways of doing things, releasing old cycles, releasing ways of doing things to allow new things to progress. Now, I have studied multiple types of astrology, and there's one thing that I do bring up whenever it comes to Saturn going through your 12th, your first, and your second. In Vedic astrology, Vedic would be, Indian dot, not feather. I'm feather, dot is other. When it comes to Vedic astrology, they say that when Saturn goes through the sign right before your moon sign, where your moon sign is, and the sign afterwards, that is 7.5 years of bad luck. I do not agree. I do not agree because of what I've seen in people's personal lives and what I have dealt with in my own life. So I have another way to look at it. And that is when Saturn is going through your 12th, your first, and your second. When Saturn starts to go through your 12th, it starts to also open up areas of karma, and it brings certain things to the surface. You can make decisions that are not necessarily good for you, but you won't know the full effect of those decisions until after Saturn comes into your first house and you literally feel the weight of the world on your shoulders. You got a couple years until that happens. So we're right in the first place and we're right in the start. And Saturn going through your 12th house is going to make you close out some things. It's going to make you end some things. It's going to make you release certain things. It's also asking you to take steps in a new direction, in an area of life that you've never been in before. Understand that you're going to be dealing with some unknowns over the next few years. You can be blindsided by some heaviness in the next few years, not necessarily fully understanding where the energy is taking you. And understand that if we get grabbed by certain energies, that later on, if what we got grabbed by or the decisions that we made were not fully, right or respectful of how the rest of your life path goes, then later on, Saturn is going to wash away those people and wash away those situations. But to do that, he will put a lot of heaviness on you. Having Saturn go through your 12th is not necessarily great for anyone that has health issues. And understand that Saturn is not going to do things directly. In many ways, a lot of the action that will be carried out will not be through Saturn. It will be through the other transits that are aspecting Saturn. Right now, Saturn is in your 12th, while the ruler, the traditional ruler of Pisces, Jupiter, is in your first house. And that's where Jupiter is going to be until May, until we get through eclipse season. So a lot of the changes and a lot of adjustments that you're doing, it's timely, and we have a lot of hope and we have a lot of faith that things are going to go well. Jupiter in your first house can very much inflate your ego and make you want to do all the things all the time right now. You can very much be very reactive and respond like a Gemini, and I wouldn't suggest that right now. Be mindful in your actions. Be mindful in how you make steps forward. Be mindful in your partnerships. Be mindful in business. Be mindful in who you surround yourself with, because a lot of these areas are going to be a part of the tests over the next 2 to 3 years as Saturn is going through your 12th house. Regretfully, as of this year, you have now started your 7.5 years of bad luck. Now, if you are a nighttime chart, you will feel Saturn's energy more than you would feel if you were a daytime chart. Saturn is more of a nighttime malefic, and he's going to put, again, a lot of strain and a lot of heaviness over time, over the next few years. Just be mindful if you have new things coming towards you, you have new energy coming towards you, you have new ways of wanting to do things, you need to make very wise decisions, very timely decisions. Because if you jump the gun and you do too much too fast, Saturn will humble you. And you need to be aware of that. Okay. Excuse me, clearing my throat. I don't mean to. Okay. Taurus and Taurus rising. Saturn is going through your 11th house of friends, network, colleagues, humanitarianism, the way that you donate certain parts of your time, the way that you connect with certain people, masses of people, not necessarily your neighbors, not necessarily like your instant surrounding all the time people, but the bigger areas of people, the bigger groups. If you volunteer, if you go and do stuff with a club, I'm a Jeeper, so I'm in a Jeep club. So I use myself for an example. When I do stuff with my Jeep club, a lot of the times there's 11th house transits for me. So understand that Saturn going into your 11th house is going to put more emphasis on friends and your surroundings and your soul tribe and the people that are going to do well. You have just ended Saturn going through your 10th house of career and public image. And a lot of my Taurus rising people have made huge changes in this area. They've let go of certain partnerships. They have made certain changes in career. They have changed their focus and how they see career. And now, as Saturn is going into your 11th house, we're going to see how that plays out when it comes to people. And if you've done all the right things, and if you stay mindful, what you're going to find is, especially later this year, whenever Jupiter comes into your first house. So once Jupiter comes into Taurus, and he will be there for a good year and a half, you will see just how beneficial your recent decisions and those recent acts could be. But you will also be tested in these relationships. You will be tested whenever it comes to friendships. You will be tested in many different areas of your life that you haven't been tested in before. So be aware of those things. Be mindful that not everybody has the same information as you. Not everybody has the same inkling and how you do things. You're ruled by the bull. I like that. That's like the symbol of Taurus, obviously. But I always really take Tauruses and I think of turtle. You guys will change, but you're stubborn about it. You're slow about it. And the minute something is going up too fast, y'all will recluse into that turtle shell. I don't care. You do. Sometimes you're the turtle. Sometimes you're the bull with the horns. I'm more thinking of the turtle right now. If you make mindful steps and you understand that not everybody is going to agree with you, not everybody is going to be on the same page, and you're going to be tested in this area, then it's going to make things a lot easier. But Saturn is telling us it's time for those recent decisions, for the actions of the last few years to now play out in another area and change things. And if you have done things in a mindful way, your karma will come through in a positive way. If you have done things in a selfish way, your karma will come through a little bit more negatively. Be aware that you are susceptible to both based off of your decisions. Saturn rules karma. Saturn rules time. We got to let time play out, and you're going to feel the effects of your karma very quickly. And if you feel those effects being reached negatively this year, then that tells you something about your karma. If you feel like you have reached a lot of benefits and you've had a lot of great things happening for you, then you're going to have the positive effects of karma. And once Jupiter comes from your 12th house to your first, it will inflate your ego quite a bit. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, be mindful of what you're doing and the decisions you're making. Okay. For my Gemini and Gemini risings. Okay, again, for some of you, this is going to be your Saturn square. For others, this is going to be Saturn at some point squaring your sun or squaring any other placements that you have in the sign of Gemini. But Saturn will be the one applying things. Therefore, Saturn is saying, I want these things to change. I want these things adjusted. I want these things to go a certain way. So once I get over there, things are where they're supposed to be. Once I get to Gemini here in like 8, 9, 10 years, like it's been going to be a while. We've got some time. But once Saturn goes over and crosses and does that 90-degree angle, because it is a square, a 90-degree angle to those natal points, you will feel pressure to do some things. You will feel like it's time to make some changes. It's time to level up. It's time to make some adjustments. If you are a Gemini rising for sure, then a lot of your adjustments are going to be in your career, and it's going to be in your work, and it's going to be in your public image. Saturn going through your 10th house can tell you that it's time to shine. And how do you shine? You shine with the people that you surround yourself with. You shine based off of all of your recent actions and allowing for the correct things to happen. If we have had decisions that have occurred over the last year that has made us experience new lessons, if it's made us experience new areas of life, if we've had, and I'm saying experience for a reason, Saturn going through your 9th house, because that's where Saturn was for the last 2 years up until March 7th. He made you deal with things either medically, going to doctors, in a courtroom, or in an educational standpoint. You've had to take on additional training and additional knowledge. You have had to take on legal matters to close certain things out, or we have had to take on medical matters that needed to be handled a certain way. So that way the timeliness and that timely effect of Saturn now moving into your 10th can open the way that they're supposed to. If you've done the right things, Saturn going through your 10th house is going to truly make areas in regards to your hopes and dreams for the future, in regards to your career, in regards to your public image and the way that you are known, your reputation, it will do well. The things that you're wanting for the future will come through in a timely fashion. Notice how I keep referring to time. It will not be instantaneous. Geminis, you will struggle with this the most. We like our gratification, instant gratification. That is just like the theme of this entire generation. We like things to move quickly. I'm a Gemini sun and a Gemini Mercury, baby. I know it. Quick like rabbit, not slow like turtle. We like to move. We like to do things. Saturn will tell you, not so damn fast, rabbit. Slow it down. Slow it down. Be mindful. Take easy steps. understand that life is a bit of a cha-cha. You take 2 steps forward, you take 2 steps back. You go to the side, you go to the side. Cha-cha, baby. Do what's necessary to do well in regards to career and in regards to your work. And life will reward you. Karma will reward you. My people that are having their Saturn squares, so 1971 to 1974, the 2001 to 2003, or the 1942 to 1944, so grandmas and grandpas, if you fall into this range, Saturn will be applying pressure and really telling you, again, it is time for this adjustment so I can touch these things later. So the full cycle will come through later. It'll be time to deal with certain things as a person once Saturn comes into your first. But right now, Saturn is pushing for you to do well in a certain area. And over the next 3 years, you're meant to shine and you're meant to do well in these areas. Okay. Moving along. Cancer and Cancer risings. Saturn is in your 9th. And for a lot of my Cancers, it's going to be a mix of a couple different things over the next few years. I don't mind Saturn in the 9th. It's actually not nearly a heavy energy as some of the other transits. A lot of this has to do with what you are doing, what you are experiencing, where you are going within your experiences. Sitting still is not going to necessarily be an easy thing while Saturn is going through your 9th. And a lot of people are going to do travel. Now, I want to be really clear. Ancient astrologers for thousands of years called travel with the 9th house long distance travel. My problem with that is technology has advanced. And I don't necessarily call it long distance travel because long distance travel back in the day was traveling somewhere by carriage, by horse-drawn carriage, and it takes longer than 1 day to get there. That was long distance travel. But I can get to a whole other state in my car, driving like a speed demon, being honest. I can go to Kansas in an hour. I can be in Arkansas in an hour and a half, a little bit less actually. I can be in Kansas, I can be in Texas or Louisiana in 5 to 6 hours. New Mexico's a little bit longer. It's another direction. Oop, I hit the microphone. Sorry. I'm sorry. I talk with my hands. This is a real life thing. I really do talk with my hands. So you will be called to travel more, you will desire to travel more, to get out of where you're at. You want to experience new areas of life. In addition to that, many of my Cancer rising people, they're going to be educating others, starting to take on more of a teacher, trainer-like position. And even these positions of training and doing those things that offer education to others will have you traveling more. It will have you on the go. You are going to be very, very busy. But this is a good energy for you guys. It's going to actually make you very happy. And considering right now we have Jupiter going through your 10th house of your career and of your public image, then we'll later be going into your 11th house of friends and network and colleagues. I like this energy for my Cancer rising people. Be aware that you're taking on this new position in life where more people are going to lean on you and come to you and ask you questions. They're going to want to learn from you and your experience because you're a water sign. And having Saturn going through a water sign is going to make other people that's not used to that kind of magnetically gravitate towards those water signs going, hi, I'm not used to emotion. Air moons. Talk to me. Tell me what is going on. Just tell me what's going on. I don't really get it. You'll get used to it. You can be making decisions to go back to school. If you're not necessarily the one that is going to be in the trainer or be in the teacher position, you could be making the choice to become a student again. Going back to school, going to college, just going and getting some level of like certification or education. It can be as small as like, I'm going to go get my CDL. I'm going to go get my welding certificate, but we take on a different level of education, of understanding something or learning something while Saturn is going through the 9th house. Later and deeper into it, you could have to do things in regards to dealing with medical staff, if you are going towards that, then more than likely it's going to be based off somebody else's health more so than your own. But just be aware of that, making some additional doctor visits, doing some additional things in hospitals or medical areas. If you don't go in that direction, you could be going in the legal direction. I don't feel that as much with Cancer risings. I feel like if that was going to be the case, you really probably dealt with it back when we had the eclipse axis going through Cancer and Capricorn, back whenever Pluto was earlier in Capricorn. So for most people, if they were dealing with legal matters, they were going to be more tied to like 2019 to 2021. I'm more leaning towards the 2019 to 2020 range. If we had situations from there, they could be coming back up. They can be coming back to the surface, and you could be dealing with legal matters from that timeline. Maybe. I don't feel that so heavy, but I'm not going to rule it out either. I'm just being very, very cautious and making you aware that that can be a part of the energy. I don't feel it so much for the Cancer risings. I feel like it's more going to be education and travel, learning, teaching, experiencing life in new ways, learning through new experiences more so than anything else. And all of these lessons, all of these, whether you're the student or the teacher, all of the lessons, all of the experience is meant to bring you towards a new way of doing things in your career, a new way of being seen in regards to your public image. And it's going to benefit you in the people that you network with, and the people that you work with, and the people that you surround yourself with. You're going to have a vast change and growth in these areas. It's just going to take going through the new levels of initiative to allow things to progress. Some of you have already been dealing with it. Some of you have known it's coming for some time, especially if you've had readings from me before. For others, you're just going to kind of start to feel yourself falling towards this direction. I want to travel. I want to do things. I want to go some certain places or certain places. We feel that incline to do that. You will feel that at some point. Okay. For my Leos and Leo risings, the 8th house has layers. Having Saturn in your 8th house, understand that there are layers to what's going to happen over the next few years. The topical layer, the upper layer of the 8th house, is money and assets, but it's usually shared money, partnership money, like tied to your partner. If the first house is you and your person, the second house is your money and it's your shit. The mirror of the first house is the 7th house. That's other people. And that's their stuff. The 8th house is their money. The other thing about the 8th house, whenever it comes to that level of money, is it doesn't necessarily have to just be their money. It can be investments. So if you've put your money into a hedge fund, if you've put your money into stock, if you've put your money into crypto, boy, howdy, I hope that hasn't been the case, because I'm seeing more and more of how that's exploding. But wherever we've put that money, wherever we've had investments, those areas are going to be shaky and they're going to be tested. Considering you're going to have Pluto going into your 7th house of partnerships right after this, I see a mix of a couple different things. And I'm going to stick with just the topical layer, and then I'll do the next layer whenever it comes to Leo risings. So the topical layer would be new partnerships, new finances, adjustments in this area, letting go of old ways of doing things and allowing new things to come through. Taking on new investments, changes in investments, changes in the way that you make money, or changes in the way your partner is making money, changes in their career, and allowing for them to do different things in that financial aspect. Those are the topical ways, just a few. Now let's talk about the bottom half of the 8th house. The 8th house, let's start with this. The thing about money is not everybody likes to talk about money. It's true. Not everybody likes to talk about money. So certain things can become very secretive. The 8th house is a house of secrets. It's also a sexual house, but it's not the fun, lovey, romantic kind. No, it's the BDSM kind. It's the kind with a safe word. It's the kinky kind. That's not a bad thing. It's really not. And for a lot of Leo risings, they can get a little kinkier. They can want to be a little bit more sexually adventurous. I feel like that could come later more this year whenever we're deeper into the transits. But I'm being honest, like it can very much be a kinky sexual house. It's also a house of affairs. Secret sex, 9 times out of 10, results in affairs. Having secrets come to the surface. Now I want to be very clear about some things for some Leo risings because, well, I have seen a pattern. I'm not pinpointing one, I'm seeing the pattern of Leo risings. If we have made very you rolled by the sun, ego, selfish decisions in the last few years, literally since the summer of 2020, whenever we had both the Venus retrograde in your 11th house and the North Node in your 11th house, because that's when I've seen a lot of these little patterns activating for people that have been continuous since then. If you have done something secretive, literally since that timeline, so since the summer of 2020, if you thought you were doing something real secretive, you're doing something real slick, understand that those are going to come to the surface. If you've been doing things that shouldn't have been getting done, your secrets are going to come to the surface with Saturn in the 8th house. There's a reason people get caught over time. Either they get sloppy or, notice I said time, karma comes involved. There will be things that are going on over the next few years that as Saturn continues and Saturn does what it's going to do, anything that needs to come to the surface that karmically it's time for them to come to the surface, they're going to, whether you like it or not. So if you've done things during that timeline, expect the repercussions. Don't be so surprised by it. Is this all going to happen in March? No. We're talking about a time that's going to go all the way until the first part of 2026 because Saturn's going to be here for a while. So understand that if you have done some things in regards to partnerships or legal matters that weren't necessarily clear, that you can see those things come to the surface and come to bite you. If we've had an adjustment in partnerships in a more positive light, then we're going to see the financial effects in regards to their money and your money and the shared money. We're going to see how well it's going to do. And in some ways, that shared financial area can be very tested. These areas in regards to debt, if it's taxes involved or that level of loans and debts and payouts, then that can be the area that's getting tested, the financial areas of life, but not your pocketbook, not your immediate assets, but those shared ones, the ones that are tied to someone else. As your obligations shift over these next few years, so too will this area of shared finance and shared assets. Okay. For Virgo and Virgo risings. Now, again, July 26, 1978 to September 21st, 1980. September 19th, 1948 to August 13th, 1951. September 2nd, 2007 to July 21st of 2010. These are your Saturn oppositions. If you are the 2007 to 2010, this is your kids, your niece, your nephew. That's their oppositions. And this can be a very, very trying time in this area. Now, specifically, if you are a Virgo rising with this opposition, then you are not, what you're going to see is this interaction with other people is going to be tested. The way that you deal with obligations, the way that you just interact with people. If they're the younger ones, you can see the desire, like, I want to be in a relationship. I don't know why, but we always have that one. I always picture a little girl, but I'm the oldest of a lot of kids and most of us are girls. So I always picture a little girl. I want to have a boyfriend. You're 6. No. Obviously, we're not talking about a 6-year-old, but that's the first thing I think of. Is just like, I'm ready to have my first boyfriend. I want a boyfriend. I want a husband. Like, no, you're 6, you're 9, you're 12. You're not doing that. No, we're not doing that at all. But that's kind of this energy. We're wanting something very serious, and we want those serious connections, and we want pivotal connections. We want connections that are going to mean something. And for the younger ones, that's going to make some of them boy crazy or girl crazy. For other ones, they're just going to kind of fall into some situations to where they're suddenly in a relationship. Now, if you're a little bit older, you're going to feel like things are pushing you into a certain direction. If you have, as you've been dealing with the last few years, and Saturn was going through your 6th house and was testing those areas of, how you care for yourself and how you care for other people, the things that you do in work. And now that Saturn is going into your 7th house, you are going to see the way that you connect with people, the recent dealings in regards to those actions turning into something much larger. Sometimes that's just going to result in partnerships, but sometimes that's going to result in legal matters. And you're going to see those play out over the next few years. We're adjusting certain things. Saturn is letting us know it's time for this area to adjust. If you are married and your relationship has been very rocky, Saturn is either going to tell you how to strengthen that relationship and bring the resolve back up, or he's going to test it to the brink that it starts to break apart. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I'm going to be very realistic about what I'm seeing. Saturn going through the 7th house can be very, very trying to partnerships. And if you don't make the right steps, and if you don't do the right actions, the way that continues and the way that can hit you can be very, very heavy. The other side of that is that if you've been single for a while, or you had been previously in a negative relationship, you're going to now look at all of your partners in a very different light. The potential of a partner will need to reach a certain critique. You Virgo risings. If they don't hit all the check marks on the list, they're not meant to be your partner. You love your lists, Virgo placements. You love them. Use the list. Create your checklist of what those things are going to be, but be realistic in your checklist. That's going to be the other half of Saturn. You're going to want a certain image in regards to partnership, but you need to be very realistic in this, because if you say, I want a prince that has a dragon and a convertible because I want to be Barbie and a princess all at once, guess what? That's not realistic. That's not going to happen. But if your list is more like, I want a good partner that's going to be a teammate, that's going to talk with me, that's going to conversate with me, that's going to do these things with me, Saturn is going to show you how that person can be. And he's going to put that type of energy in front of you to where you're getting a different way to look at partnerships. I like Saturn coming into your 7th, because now that we have a very different stringent energy to balance Neptune and all the crap Neptune's been doing in your 7th house of partnerships for the last 12 years. I think it's 12, 13 years. Neptune's been there for a minute. And Neptune makes us very idealistic and romanticized and a little delusional, because we're talking about Neptune and we're talking about Pisces. Like, it can make us a little delusional. There's a very specific type of energy in regards to partnerships, in regards to relationships, that are going to be necessary. And Saturn is going to put that realistic spin on it. Again, if you have you've been in a partnership for a while, but that partnership has been shaky, that marriage has not been on good ground, that relationship has been distant, there's been some tests in this area, Saturn will add more to the tests. And it's like the pressure of making diamonds, the level of pressure that he can apply in this area. We, as humans, tend to react very emotionally. And whenever we're having this planet of pressurizing energy going through the partnership house, this relationship house, this marriage house, obligations, legal matters, and things like that, having him go through this area of the sky, of our chart, is going to make us really check ourselves and check the situation, and he's going to test things. If you've had a rocky relationship, it's really time to go into therapy. If you're wanting it to work, but it's been rocky, couples counseling, go to therapy, do what you need to do. Do your own internal healing so that way you can invest differently in your relationship. That's if you want it to work. If this is not meant to work, if it's not doing well, understand that Saturn is going to put some additional tests in this area and kind of drive a wedge here. Take what control you can, take what actions you can to heal that area if you're wanting to overcome things. But if you're ready for that relationship to be over, Saturn's got your back. Okay. Moving along, Libra and Libra risings. Saturn is now in your 6th house. And this can be something that can be very testy when it comes to illness, when it comes to health, when it comes to caring for yourself and caring for other people, when it comes to your routine. He can test a lot of these things, but he can also strengthen a lot of these things. It's time to focus on this area of life, on our routine, on our actions, how we're caring for ourselves, how we're caring for other people. With Saturn going through the 6th, you can feel the need to adjust those areas of life. You can also feel like certain things are just falling onto your plate. The thing about Saturn and going into the 6th is that we're talking about elders and we're talking about authority figures. We're talking about those matrons and patrons of our family. So those older people. And what we can start to see is adjustments in their health and adjustments in their care. And we can start to really notice over the next few years our own shift in this area and having to take on a different type of responsibility, having to take on a different mindset and a different way of doing things. This can also be really good for people with pets or livestock, for those that have animals, for those that have, that are wanting to do farms or have small farms. This can be an area where we start to care for animals differently, that we're including animals in our life now, that we are taking on a different way of doing things in regards to that part of the routine. Now, sometimes I look at pets in the 6th house. Sometimes I look at it in the 5th, because for some of us, our pets are our kids. For some of us, our pets are a way of life, and they're literally a way of income. Yeah, I was raised on a ranch. Like, I know what cattle is like. I know. You'll love this. My grandmother, whenever she would drive by another farm, that like cattle farm, and it would just be one of those stinky days. You could just smell all the manure. She would just roll the window and smells like money. I'm like, oh my God. But that's just it. For some people, when it comes to this area, we're having adjustments in our work and in our routine, considering the nodal energy lately has been going through your 2nd and 8th house, so in your money houses. At least in part, the first part of Saturn going through Pisces could be very much adjustments in your finances, in that area of life tied to work and career. If that's going to be the case, it's going to most likely happen in 2023, not so much 2024 or 2025, but there will be an adjustment in this area, and it's going to make you question certain things. So understand that you have a lot of adjustments in your work, a lot of adjustments in routine. There can be adjustments surrounding pets or livestock, depending on how that falls for you. Back in the old days, they include servants here, and I don't do that. But if you are a business owner, this can be something that is in regards to your employees. There can be a very serious adjustment in regards to your staffing. If you've been in a small business, but you're starting to grow, then we need to take on additional staff. If you have been in a large business and now inflation is killing everything and you have to take some things down so that way you can maintain profitability and maintain the business, then there can be some hard decisions regarding staff and having to let people go or do layoffs or something like that. So understand that there are adjustments in regards to work and routine that are coming over the next few years. And for my Libra risings, the next 6 months, so March, through into summer, there can be a lot of adjustments in career and finance that are going to come through. Be aware of that, whether that's just changing a position at your job or changing jobs completely, which therefore is going to be changing your routine. Understand those adjustments are coming. They are coming. Okay. For Scorpio and for Scorpio rising, Saturn is now in your 5th house of love and romance and joy and children. Saturn going through your 5th house is telling you that it's time for a certain type of change. It's time for a new focus. There have been so many tests when it comes to the fixed signs, specifically now with looking at Scorpio, that's had changes in its home life, changes in our roots and our ancestry, changes in partnership, and changes in our obligations. And when we've let go of so many things, we have allowed for a certain amount of weight to literally anchor us to where we didn't want to move. Many Scorpio risings for the last few years have really been immobile. They've been at a point where they just want to be at home. They just want to be a homebody. And the thing is that's either brought up certain areas of depression, that's brought up old wounds, that's brought up a lot of healing, considering the South Node since January of 2022, sorry, I forgot what year I'm in. Since January of 2022, we've had the South Node going through that 1st house. And we have had a lot of things that we have needed to release and let go of physically, mentally, in our ego, in our intuition, in our habits. We've adjusted a lot of things. And we've needed to let go of certain habits so that way we could have a new way of focusing on our core self and finding interior alignment. If you have not fell into an area where you have connected with alignments, Saturn in your 5th is going to say, bitch, why aren't you happy? We need to be happy. We have released so many bad things. It's time, Saturn, it's time to be happy. Do those things that speak to your inner child. Do those things that connect you with your children, that connect you with childlike things. This is very, very 6 of Cups type of energy whenever it comes to tarot cards. Understand that you can do these things of nostalgia, and you can revisit those areas of your past, and you can find ways to be happy and still do well and still do the things that you love and still lean into those obligations as long as you're doing what's necessary. Now, I will say for a lot of people, as Saturn has gone into this 5th, understand that you are experiencing different things, and you will be experiencing things that take you back to your childhood, that make you revisit parts of your childhood. But a lot of where we're going right now is to adjust our image and adjust our mindset and adjust these areas of where we're wanting to do well in the future. We're going to be building new routines and new infrastructure and new ways of doing things later this year. And as we get to that more efficient timeline, that's going to come again later this year, as we get more into that efficient timeline of producing something, of being more proactive, of being able to care for other things or care for ourselves differently, our happiness will grow and our happiness will build. If you've already gone through a good portion of the test, Saturn going straight into your 5th house was immediately, I'm happy again. I feel happy again. God forbid something actually feels like it's going right for once. If you are not feeling that happiness, if you are not feeling that energy, then Saturn is telling you you're not in alignment. And the farther out of alignment you are, the harder this energy can be, the harder these lessons can be. Okay. Moving along. For Sagittarius and Sagittarius risings, Saturn is in your fourth house, home life, family, roots, ancestry, things from the past, things that are tied to past members of the family. Those are going to be coming to the surface. Those are going to be a big part of the focus. There are times and areas where we need to change the way we see our family, the way that we connect with family, the way that we see our household. In the next few years, for a lot of Sagittarius risings, y'all could be moving. Your family could be growing. Considering Sagittarius, you are ruled by Jupiter, and your chart ruler, Jupiter, is in your fifth house of love and romance and children. I would not be surprised if we have a influx of Sagittarius rising people having children this year. Because of Jupiter's energy in your fifth, and because of the eclipse axis it's going to start going through your 11th and your fifth. There's going to be changes in regards to children, in regards to love, in regards to romance, in regards to your happiness. And Saturn is going to make you focus on your way of seeing family, in your way of seeing mothers and motherhood, and your connection to that ancestral part of your life connected to mothers and your motherhood in that maternal side of your family. We all have two sides. We all have a mom and a dad. So there's a paternal side and a maternal side. This is maternal energy. We're adjusting things connected to this area of our life. We're adjusting our home life. We are going to have changes in our home. We are going to renovate our home. We are going to look at moving. We are going to update the bedrooms, update something. There's going to be adjustments in this area, and it's not going to be a one and done. It's going to be adjustments that take place over the course of the next few years. And part of that at first is going to be based off of romance, romantic connections happening, and we're moving in together. That can be the first change. If we are growing our family and we're having another child, well, I got a 3-bedroom house and we're about to have our 4th kid. Time to get a bigger house. If we're older, considering we have to also talk about those Saturn squares from your natal Saturn and Sag. If you are in that older category, then some of you are going through the empty nest syndrome, and you're seeing that your children have grown and they're going through a different phase of life and they're starting to move away from you. And that's going to, again, change your image as a mother and change the way that you look at your household. If you have a big 2-story house because at one point you had the Brady Bunch, but now you don't have the Brady Bunch, it's you and Joe Bob and a couple of dogs, maybe we don't need the big 2-story house. Maybe we talk about downsizing. Maybe we have to do renovation work up there so that way we can even make that kind of adjustment. But understand that a large part of the adjustment that's coming forward for Sagittarius is over the next few years directly is a reflection of family, of your home life, and of this area. A lot of our adjustments and a lot of our focus is going to be on our family, on love, on children, on childhood, and building this area. In a lot of ways, it's building it up and making certain things happen a certain way, but this is where the adjustment is. This is where we're clearing things out. This is where we're building things. Okay. For Capricorn and Capricorn risings, we are talking about Saturn, who is your chart ruler. You are ruled by Saturn. And the one thing that is very different than of Capricorn risings that other signs don't necessarily have is the fact that the ruler of this 3rd house of communication, of short distance travel, of your mindset and the way that you talk about certain things, the way that you connect with your neighbors, the way that you communicate certain things. A lot of things in regards to marketing and branding can be tied to the 3rd house because there's a mindset shift, but that's just it. There's a mindset shift. You have your chart ruler, Saturn, going into the 3rd house, which is ruled by Jupiter. The reason you are different compared to other signs is this 3rd house, communication house ruler also rules your 12th house of the unknown, the unseen, healing, endings, behind your back stuff, new stuff, uncharted territory. And that there's a little bit of uncharted territory for Capricorn risings, because you guys are having so many things change. You've already had some changes, but you're really going to feel it moving forward, because since 2007, you've had Pluto going through your first house. Pluto is going to start to leave Capricorn this year. Pluto actually leaves Capricorn in March. So we have that planet of fear and transformation and death and reincarnation leaving your first house, changing parts of your ego and changing parts of your mindset. Saturn just ended this week on March the 7th. Saturn just ended your 7.5 years of bad luck. Because you had Saturn go through Sag, then Saturn go through your first house in Capricorn, and then we just had Saturn in Aquarius. So you had certain things that like blindsided you, that were done behind your back, that came to the surface. And then you had Saturn going through your first, where he made a conjunction to Pluto. And 2019 was not an easy year. It was very, very heavy. 2020 was not an easy year. It was very, very heavy. And I'm not talking about the pandemic. I am talking about the transits that were involved. And now we are shell-shocked. A lot of my Capricorn rising people, they have PTSD from that timeline. And the thing that I want to tell you guys more so than any other sign is you can talk about it. It is time to talk about things. And the thing about you guys is you're not going to do so well in a clinical setting. If you go to a clinical setting, if you go to like a therapist or you go for counseling, if that counselor, if that person, whoever that is, isn't on your level in how they talk about things, if they talk over you, you're going to walk away. We already know this. You guys are so Saturnian. You like to be in charge. I love it. I love you guys so much. I maintain that. My Capricorn rising people, I have so many in my life. So I really do love you guys for a lot of different reasons. But a lot of you are going to do very, very well with spiritual healing. And what I'm not going to suggest to you is going to counseling. I'm sure as shit not going to suggest that you guys go to like group therapies, because you're not going to take it seriously. You're not going to partake. You're not going to allow yourself to be labeled the same label as other people, because you don't see yourself that way. You are more of an individual. You do take things more seriously. Your Saturn ruled, of course you take things more seriously. But now I want to put emphasis on the fact that Saturn is in the third house of communication. It's in that third house, and it is time to talk about things. You will have new reasons to travel this year. You will have adjustments in regards to the way that you see family and the way that you see your home life and the way that you see love and romance. It's going to be a big part of the rest of this year. But the thing is like you can't necessarily partake in all of that if all you ever do is sit there, zip your lip, and cross your arms. You ain't getting nowhere doing this. So listen to me. Find a yogi. Find a spiritual advisor. Find somebody that you can sit down with and interact with one-on-one. Not necessarily like a therapist that's going to sit there going, and how did that make you feel? I know how I'm feeling right now. I'm getting pissed off. I know you guys do well. Because it sounds condescending. You have to find somebody that's going to speak to you in a way that's going to be on your level, that's going to allow for that one-on-one interaction. You are going to do better with that type of individual than any other fashion, than with working with anyone else. Find your person for your one-on-one talks. Find your person that you're willing to open up to and share things with. And excuse me. I'm sorry. Hold on. It's a lot of talking after an hour. Okay. Find that person that is going to understand, that is going to be able to put things in a way that you're going to understand. I'm not saying that there's any, you guys hate asking for help, therefore you hate asking questions. You definitely don't want to ask questions in front of other people. You kind of let things unfold the way that they're going to. And once you've got a good handle on things, you take charge and you make everything happen. The first part of Saturn going through Pisces, of Saturn going through this third house, is you need to find someone to communicate with. You need to go through the recent trauma and allow for those things to finally unfold and allow for certain things to finally progress. And you need to purge, and I do mean purge, a lot of that PTSD energy. For lack of a better way to say it, like, you're really going to want to purge a lot of that, because what you're going to find is that the shift is moving you now into a more favorable timeline of your life. The amount of heavy karma that really just hit Capricorn risings in the last 7 years is truly profound. I say this because I have literally gone back and forth over those transits that occurred all during that timeline, back and forth. And the thing is like, no other sign got hit like Capricorn risings. And I know a lot of you have a lot of freaking PTSD. I know y'all do. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been hard. But I'm telling you, you're in a much better position now. You will have waves of that old levels of fear that start to come back. It's not going to be an overnight fix. It's going to take the next 2 to 3 years to truly get your head wrapped around the situation and get your head into a better game, into a better way of thinking and in a better way of doing things. A lot of you are going to start to really shift the way that you connect with people, connect with your surroundings, and you're going to find that there's new ways of doing things, new lessons to be had, new things that need to be taught, new things that need to be understood, new things that need to be taught to you. So new learning. And a lot of that learning, a lot of that connection, and a lot of that communication is literally going to be very, very spiritual for you, because we're talking about Pisces, and we're talking about this house that is very connected to spirituality, not so much religion, not like the classic form of religion. I do mean spirituality. And you're going to see and you're going to experience things that get you more spiritually in tune with yourself than you've ever been, as long as you start to let the layers start to fall away from you. Let those barriers start to fall down. You guys have had a very rough 7.5 years of bad luck. Supremely rough. I'm telling you, it's time to overcome it. And it's time to heal those wounds. And it's time for a new direction. And it's time for new purpose. You have new purposes and new ways to see your family, and new ways to see your future, and new ways to see so many things in life. But it takes those first steps of knowing who you can trust and who you can bounce those things off of. Find your person that you can really talk about those wounds with, so that way you can start to make the baby steps of overcoming it. Okay. Aquarius and Aquarius rising. Saturn is your traditional chart ruler. Saturn is now in your second house of money. Saturn is now in your third phase of that 7.5 years of bad luck. I know that's not a common thing that a lot of astrologers bring up. I bring it up because I've seen it firsthand. You are taking charge of your finances and of assets. There have been recent changes that have put a lot more focus in the way that you see your family, and a lot more focus in the way that you see, children, and a lot more in regards to your household. There's been a lot of changes in this area, and the recent eclipse axis of going through your 4th and your 10th has put a lot of things in focus and made you realize that the way that you thought your career was going to go, the way that you thought your future was going to go, the way that you desired for these things to go have shifted. They've changed. You have made certain changes that is now starting to pivot your direction just a bit. And you don't even know the full effect of how those recent decisions are going to play out. And it's not even going to truly come to a head and show you the full effect for a couple of years. I'm being honest about that. It's going to take time. However, if you're mindful in your actions and you're mindful in the way that you do certain things, and we don't put all of our financial eggs into one basket, Saturn in your second house of money, if we diversify those finances, then we're going to see things that are well balanced, especially the last half of 2023 and all of 2024. You will see how that balance works out for you. However, you're also going to have Pluto coming into your first house. And Pluto is going to change your mindset in a lot of ways. I've seen a lot of Aquarius risings. And a lot of you have been sinking more and more into the depths of your mind. And the only thing I have seen Aquarius risings really sink into is they want to be away from people. They want to be separated. They want to break away, and they don't want to necessarily be around people. They're more in tune with nature. You're going on hikes. You're going on long drives. You're doing something to where you're trying to do things on your own. And what that's going to transpose into is that the way that you look at business and the way that you look at things moving forward as an individual is going to be a lot more solitary. You're going to have to separate certain things in regards to partnerships. You're going to have adjustments in your career. What plan you had 2 years ago is not going to be the plan moving forward, because we have put more emphasis into our family. And we want certain things for our family to go a certain way. We've either awakened to just how important they are to us, or we're seeing the levels of independence that are necessary for them. And again, we're making adjustments. If we had always thought that we were going to have this big family business, and all of a sudden, like, the kids don't want anything to do with the family business, like, I don't want to be a farmer, I want to move to town, and I want to do TikTok. I didn't say anything that you haven't heard some form of before. And you're starting to see, like, well, maybe if that's really how they feel and they're not going to live here, or even if they're going into the military or they go to another country or something like that, they go so far in that other direction to let you know they're not coming back to this. Then this idea of, like, the big family business that's going to go from generation, you might go, well, maybe it's time to close. Maybe it's time to sell. Maybe it's time to do something different, because it's going to allow for that independence in our family and in our home to really happen. Now, not everybody is going to be as accepting to the kid that wants to just do TikToks and live in the city all the time. Not everybody's going to be accepting of that. That's another reason why Saturn is that ruler of time. And it takes time for us to accept certain decisions. So I'm going to be fair about that. But don't be surprised if that's the thing that we see, is that we see that we need to break away and move away from our current home life and our current, where our roots and our family is set up. We start to break away from what we thought was going to be the long-term picture in regards to career and the family business or anything like that, because other people are going another way. And now we have no one for that longevity. We have no one to leave those things to in legacy. So we start to make adjustments and we look at selling the business or something like that. And that makes us refocus our thoughts on our money and on our assets and where those things are going and how those things are going to be handled. And that is going to be a big part of the energy over the course of the next few years. Years. I want to be really clear about that. Okay. Moving along. Last but not least, Pisces and Pisces risings. Pisces. Y'all ain't gonna like me. But I'm not a sugarcoater. I don't promise you sunshine and rainbows to hand you Skittles. I'm realistic about the things that I see. You are now in phase 2 of your 7.5 years of bad luck. You are. Saturn There's been recent events, not just in the course of the last 2 years, but even over the course of the last few months, there has been recent events because all of those transits that hit Saturn right before everything went into Pisces, there's been recent events that are now starting to adjust your mindset and your focus and your image and in your body and the way that you do things and the way that you want to carry yourself. You are about to deal with a lot of shifts, and you're going to end up taking on different levels of responsibility, not even necessarily responsibility that you wanted to take on. And more so, you're going to take these on either because you've made bad decisions in the last few years that now you have to deal with the repercussion because Saturn is in your first, or you are having to take on responsibility because of the actions of another. And that is specific for Pisces because Saturn came into your first house during the full moon in your seventh house of partnerships. So this really felt very interesting for my Pisces risings because I feel like a lot of you are starting to take on new levels of responsibility, new areas of life, new levels, ways of like, just, I have to level up in a certain way. We're taking on different energy, but for a lot of the Pisces risings, what you are taking on isn't even because of your decisions. It's what's been impressed upon you based off the decisions of other people, based off what they did, their stupidity. Sometimes, a lot of times it's stupidity, their reactive energy, their emotional energy. And you are going to end up dealing with a lot of things. And the main thing that you need to know as Saturn goes through your first house, especially if Saturn is your natal Saturn's in Pisces, so you might be going through your Saturn return. If you have, depending on where your ascendant is, like right now on the screen, the ascendant is at 15 degrees. So say your natal Saturn is at 15. Well, you're not even going to fully experience Saturn hitting your ascendant until next year. But that doesn't excuse anything because by sign, by whole house, Saturn is in your first house. And Saturn is putting pressure, and Saturn is testing you, and Saturn is pushing you, and you will literally feel like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders because Saturn is making you level up as a person. Now, if you are that natal Saturn in Pisces, so that would be January 28th of 1994 to April 7th of 1996, or March 23rd of 1964 to March 3rd of 1967. So this is our time frame. I didn't go back to the 30s. I didn't really necessarily think that a whole lot of people from the 30s would be watching this. So I only did those two time spans. Saturn now is going to be making you level up as a person. If you are older, Saturn coming into your first house, that pressure could start to literally come through your body. You can feel that pain in your legs differently. You can feel that pain in your joints and in your bones differently. That's because that's what Saturn rules. There's a reason we start to feel things in our body whenever Saturn is going through our first house. One, it's our first house. Two, it's Saturn. And what he does is he makes you take on a different type of responsibility. He makes you go into that area of management that you don't necessarily want to be in. He makes you go into those areas where you're into more isolation. If you're around somebody, you might not be in a great relationship partner-wise. Hopefully, that's not the case for everybody. I would love for more people to have like good partnerships and having a good teammate for you. But the thing is, Saturn is going to make you see your teammates and whether you can trust them, whether they're respectful, whether they're responsible, whether they respect your boundaries. If you need to establish boundaries, Saturn is going to make you do it. Like, you know what? I'm sick of your shit. This is the line. Moving forward, this is the line. Don't frickin' cross it. Because if you cross this line, you're going to deal with the aftermath. You're going to take on a lot of that Saturnian energy. You're going to take on a lot of that Saturnian mindset of, I'm not going to put up with your shit. I will not put up with all of the nonsense. And it's going to make you level up. He's going to test you in a lot of ways. Considering you've had Neptune in your first house for a very long time, last year you had Jupiter going through your first house, so you've had a lot of like inflated, hopeful, overly optimistic ways of doing things. And Saturn is going to bring a sense of reality to a lot of that. And I'm not saying that as a negative. There's a lot of people that they understood that was temporary energy, and they didn't make mountains out of molehills in regards to like the opportunities coming through. They were mindful. However, if we did take on too many liberties, if we made too many adjustments because everything's going great and I'm so happy, Saturn is going to come right into the mix and go, it ain't as great as you think. We need to adjust this. We need to adjust this. We need to change this. We need to do this. We need to do this. And if you don't do them, I'm going to make them break. They will break. They will fall apart. They will not do well in one way, shape, or form, because Saturn is going to say, guess what? It's time. So understand Saturn's energy and understand that he's going to adjust you as a person, and understand that he is making you level up in a lot of ways. And once we get to the end of the Saturn and Pisces transit, and when Saturn gets really close to Neptune, a lot of that leveling up, babies, it's not just going to be about the physical. It's not just going to be about the ego. It's going to be about your spiritual alignment. Because as Saturn gets closer to Neptune, you're going to have a lot of adjustments, and you're going to have a lot more faith and understand the reality on top of the spiritual. You'll have to combine these two areas to allow a different form of strengthening that hasn't necessarily been felt by every single person out there. A lot of people have never had to deal with a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. The last time this occurred was back in 1987 to 89. I think I have that right. Whenever Saturn and Uranus and, is it 87? No. Hold on. Where's that? 88. It was 88 to 90. Okay, sorry. November 88 to 90. So when Saturn was going through Capricorn, it made a conjunction to both Neptune and Uranus. Before that, it happened in the sign of Virgo, I believe it was. So it takes a long time for us to have these Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. We're going to see a lot of adjustments, but not always in direct ways, not always in easily recognizable ways, not always in known ways. Be truthful to yourself, be truthful to other people. It is going to be very easy to inflate our verbiage and the things that we're saying, but understand that if you do that, it will come back to bite you. You need to be mindful of these things. If this is your Saturn return energy, so again, January 28th of 1994 to April 7th of 96, March 23rd, 64 to March 3rd of 1967. If you fall into this category, then you're really going to feel that shift. If this is your second Saturn return, it's exactly that. You've already dealt with this type of energy before. If this is not your second Saturn return, if this is your first one, then you're going to be dealing with a lot of energy that you've never felt before. And the thing is like the next 2.5 years, 3 years is going to truly level you up as a person. If you take it negatively, if you feel negative and more of that weight all of the time, it's because Saturn, you're resisting what Saturn needs you to do. If you start to understand what Saturn is leaning you towards, what it's teaching you, where he's wanting you to go, the path and the direction, leading, where Saturn is leading you towards, that path of least resistance is there for a reason. But the more we resist Saturn's energy, the harder Saturn in your first is going to be. Plain and simple, it'll just be harder. Okay. If this is helpful for you, I really hope it's helpful. If you feel like you know somebody that falls into the timeline of the Saturn returns, the Saturn oppositions, or the squares, whether they're Sag or Gemini. If you feel like you know people that are falling into this category, then send this video to them. If you start to talk to, a friend or somebody that you know, and you're sitting here saying, they just keep saying, like, I just feel like everything is just heavy or crazy or hectic. They need to hear these types of things. They need to know that energetically there's pressure being applied right now. There's pressure on their person. There's pressure on them in some way. And it all kind of comes down to where that ascendant is, or if what's being activated in their natal chart. If they have strong Virgo placements, a Virgo sun, a Virgo Mercury, anything like that, then Saturn is going to make oppositions, and it's going to mess with all of that. And depending on the degree and the retrogrades and all that, will say exactly how heavy that energy is going to be. Same thing if they have Sag placements or Gemini placements, you guys are going to feel Saturn and Pisces very differently compared to any other sign. A lot of the other signs, it's going to be very, very strategic. If you are an Aries rising, you have no idea the full effect of your decisions until Saturn makes it into your first house. It's the truth. You won't understand the full effect. You won't be able to work through the full effect until later on when Saturn comes into the first and starts to make you level up as a person. So understand, we're going through changes and we're going through adjustments, and we're meant to be strengthening this spiritual area of our life, this spiritual direction that isn't easily noted and isn't easily seen, because Pisces is that mutable sign that doesn't necessarily like to be direct in its action. It's very passive in its actions. Now, on the more macro scale, if I have had individual readings with you, or if you've had individual coaching sessions with me, I've already told you, Saturn going into Pisces, the things that have been coming through my meditation since September of last year has been, we're going into a lot of financial hard times. I'm talking like financial market things. We're going into, what I was seeing last year in my meditation, I've said this to financial advisors, I've said it to realtors, I've said it to lenders, I've warned people, we're not going towards just a recession. What I keep seeing the effects of in my meditation is that we're going towards a depression. And I feel like there is going to be some things that are really testing us on the macro scale, on the big picture scale. I'm not just talking about individual signs. I'm not. I'm talking about the big picture. We're going to see a lot of craziness in regards to finances, in regards to unexplainable accidents. And we've actually already started to see the first ones before Saturn even went into Pisces. And that has come through in the chemical spills. That has come through in the train accidents, of all things. We have seen those things that should be seen as obstruction. Well, they are obstructions, but the way that they're coming through and the way that they're being handled is very passive. And there's going to be a lot of frustrations that come from that. Whenever it comes to the financial side, and as we start to see the next round of inflation and the next effects of the finances, what a lot of people don't necessarily realize is those things that are going to start to happen, and those things that start to affect our pocketbooks, and those things that start to affect the way that we handle our money and the goods and services. If you are not taking action to be more in control of those things, then you're going to end up being bit very, very hard later on. We are in the first part of spring, so I am saying something that's going to be very beneficial to everybody. We are getting closer to that zodiacal new year, and we're getting closer to spring. And if there's one thing that I can tell people to do right now is, if you have the ability to grow your own food or put more emphasis in this area, then you should. Do those things that put you more into control and get ready for those areas. So that way, if we have hard times, if you specifically have hard times, then you have the ability to still care for yourself regardless of monetary factor. I just want to be very clear, and I wanted to give that bigger perspective of things that I've been having come through my meditation. And you'll see that pattern in the future too. if I have something that starts to come through my meditation and it is so regular like that, I can't escape it. I only brought it up to certain people, what I was seeing since September of last year. The thing is now that Mars has come back is reactivating that square to Neptune, which that'll be a big theme in next week's astrology forecast. But as Mars is coming back into that play where he was whenever it was starting to come through my meditation last year, is all of those topics from September and October, they're coming back up. But I'm also seeing them play out. The things that I was seeing in meditation 5-6 months ago are now starting to play out in the mainstream and on TV. So if you aren't aware of this, if you don't know that there's already been 2 California banks that have failed this week and that there's been a bank run to get money out, you might not be aware of that. But you should be, because there's always a trickle effect. There's never just one area that goes down. Usually it affects in some way, shape, or form, it'll affect the entire industry. So when you've had multiple banks that didn't collateralize their obligations correctly, and they put too much money into one basket, a lot of those 2 banks, one was more into tech, the other one was more into crypto. When they put too much money and too many eggs into that basket and they didn't diversify, when the bottom fell out, so too did all the eggs. And so too did all the money. We're going to start to see the effect of other banks that weren't necessarily doing things the way that they were supposed to, and how that's going to have a trickle effect moving forward. Understand there are big things coming in the financial sector on the macro scale, on the big picture scale. That is completely separate from the individual signs and that individual part of the reading. So I hope this is helpful. Share this with your friends. Share the other videos with your friends. Next week, we will have the weekly forecast from March 13th. I think it's March 20th. I don't have a calendar in front of me right now. I know the 13th is the first day. It'll be Monday. So I'll do the transit reading for that week. And then I'm going to talk about another reading next week, another video next week, a podcast that'll go over manifestations and how those things how you can actually manifest things and the work involved with them. So just know that more things are coming, and I'm going to maintain a good routine. If you have questions, message me on Spiritually Bougie Astrology through Facebook. If you have direct access to me, you can always message me directly through DMs, text, or call if you have that information. But aside from that, I appreciate you. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you and believing in me. And I will see you soon. Bye-bye.